In this video, I'm going to show you how to build concrete countertops. So if you're new to this channel, my name's Josh. This channel is all about DIY to save a ton of money. So be sure to subscribe, ring that bell so you get a notification every time I release a new video, and hammer that like button for me. That's all I ask in return for making this video. So building concrete countertops is a fantastic DIY project, so let's get started. In the previous video, I showed you step by step how I framed this outdoor kitchen, and this is part 2 of a 4-part series from How to Build an Outdoor Kitchen playlist. And if you want to check out that playlist, I'll put a link in the description below. This video was sponsored by Concrete Countertop Solutions. Concrete Countertop Solutions has everything that you'll need for your concrete countertop project, including the forms, the reinforcement mesh, the stain, the sealer, everything. And if you want to get the edge on your concrete countertop project, be sure to check out their website in the description below. The first step in forming for the concrete countertop is to extend the ledge in which we need support for the cement board that's going to be the substrate for a concrete countertop. If I put a 2x4 padded out over this edge, that's going to give me a finished 3-inch overhang because the form will start here and then extend 1.5 inches. We will only need a 2x4 on the outside if we are not using a liner with our Z-form, but because I'm using a liner that's going to give me a chiseled slate rock look on the outside of the concrete countertop, I will have to apply a piece of 1/2-inch plywood first to make up for the thickness of that liner, and then my 2x4. So ultimately I need to pad out 2 inches to give me the overhang that I want. With my table saw set at 3.5 inches to match the width of the 2x4, I got a bunch of scrap 1/2-inch plywood left from framing this outdoor kitchen, so I'm going to rip down several pieces to be able to pad around this whole outdoor kitchen. I'm going to begin on this end installing the ledge boards, and these boards are simply cut the length from that end of the countertop to the end of this sheathing. That's going to be the end of this countertop. And since I got 2 boards, it's a little cumbersome to try to hold it up and screw it there. And if you have a helper, this is where it's really nice. They just hold one end, you hold the other, and screw it down. And I'm going to be using 3.5-inch deck screws, so I have plenty of penetration through both of these boards and then into the structure. And with that being said, I'm going to be using these quick grip clamps to hold it into place while I screw it down. So let me show you how to get this flush with the edge here. And the reason why I don't want to nail this is simply because these will be removed after the concrete countertop has hardened all the way. So I'm going to take my clamp here and just clamp it down to hold it roughly where it goes. I'm now going to take my speed square, and we need to make sure we're straight with the edge of this and flush. So we're going to use that as a straight edge to do so. And then the most important part is making sure we're straight and flush with the top of this form of the framing. So I'm just going to take my speed square to hold it right there, and that looks good. So now I'm just going to place a screw in each end and just one in the center on this short span. All right, this first ledge is on. As you can see, we're nice and flush with the top of this framing. So I'm going to remove these quick grip clamps and then continue that process around the whole perimeter of where the countertop's going to sit. As you may have noticed during that time lapse, I did not put any support right here where these appliances are going. I got a griddle, side burner, and a grill right here behind me, and that's because I need to leave this open for the appliances, and this will not have countertop in this area. And I'm going to show you here in a bit how I'm going to form this up. Here is where my refrigerator is going. It's going to sit underneath the countertop, so I'm going to have a span across here with cement board that's going to act as a substrate for the countertop. So I need to support that because it's a little lengthy to have nothing there while that concrete's drying. So I'm just going to toe screw this support right here. So I'm installing this so it's easy to remove later. So I'm just going to put a screw here and a screw here. It's now time to start installing the 1/2-inch cement board. If you're not familiar with cement board typically comes in 5-foot long, 3-foot wide sheets, 1/2 inch thick or a 1/4 inch thick is the typical options you have when it comes to thickness, but for this outdoor kitchen's countertop, we want to make sure we use 1/2 inch. Very important. So with that being said, this stuff holds up great under high moisture areas such as tiled showers, kitchens and bathrooms. So that's why it's great too for underneath a concrete countertop. So the first thing I'm going to do is rip off this edge because it has a slight tapered edge on each side, and this is going to get right to the edge where I got to screw my Z-form to. So because of that, I don't want it to be a different thickness than the other part of the countertop. So that will throw us off. So I'm going to rip that off. Again, some people probably wouldn't rip that off because it might not be a big deal to them, but I know it's a small detail, but I'm going to do that. What I'll be using to rip down this cement board is a masonry blade on a circular saw, and I'm going to wear my respirator, glasses, and ear protection just because it throws up a lot of dust. You don't want to breathe and you don't want it in your eyes and it's really loud. And also you can use a oscillating tool that has a diamond blade on it. There's several options that you can do for cutting cement board, but that's what I'm doing today. I'm going to measure off this edge 34 inches and make a mark right here. And then do the same on this side. I'm then going to hook my chalk line here, and I just want to show you in general how to rip this stuff down. So then we're going to snap our line. Now I'm going to make sure I'm hanging off the edge so that I don't cut into my sawhorses or the plywood that's supporting this underneath. And I'm now going to put on my PPE and make this cut. As you just seen, that creates a lot of dust cutting it that way, but I just want to make sure I get a nice straight cut for this, so that's why I wanted to use that method. The other methods don't cause a lot of dust, like using the diamond blade on the oscillating tool, but I just want to have really precise cut for this. Set the cement board here in place, and this is going to slide like so, and we're just going to flush this up with the edge of the framing. And that's where it's going to sit roughly. Now you can secure this down using screws if you'd like, but the reason why I'm actually going to use silicone and place it on the framing to hold it, and that's just because I want to be able to remove this later if I want to without having to tear up a bunch of the top. So if it's silicone down, we can simply just pry it up off the framing just like any solid surface countertop you would use in a house or whatnot. I now have 100% silicone here in this caulk gun. With the silicone, it doesn't take much really. We're just going to run just a little bit around the edges more or less, maybe a couple dabs in the middle, because the weight of this countertop is going to hold itself down ultimately, to be honest with you. But this is just nice for a little extra security. So let's go ahead and slide this out of the way here. All right, and I'm just going to again place just a little bit right around the edges. And something else to be careful of, like I almost did, you don't want any on these supporting boards because those are going to be removed. We want to make sure we stay on the framing that's there permanently. All right, we're going to place the cement board down. And we're just going to flush it up with the edge of our supports that we just installed. And just make sure we're not overhanging any. And that's really all there is to placing it down. When I get to these openings, that's going to be for the grill, side burner, and griddle. I'm actually going to put plywood up here ultimately to form this out. I will be holding the 1/2 inch cement board back here on the framing about 3/4 of an inch. So that way, whenever the concrete's formed, it'll actually go down around the edges and you won't see any of the cement board. So I think that's an important detail to note. While installing the cement board, anywhere the cuts were not exactly perfect and are overhanging a little more than you want, you can simply take an oscillating tool with a diamond blade just like I mentioned earlier, and this is just going to vibrate and grind off any extra pieces. And again, I like to wear a respirator and turn a fan on to blow the dirt away or dust away while I'm cutting. Very important. Now that all the cement board is cut and in place, I'm going to go through at each joint and put just a light bead of silicone here and smooth it out, just to make sure I don't have any type of seepage of the concrete while I'm pouring it. I was about an inch short from coming back as far as I wanted to with this cement board, so I just filled this in with a piece of 1/2 inch pressure treated plywood. So that's no big deal at all. As long as we have support here for our forms, we're good to go. I'm now going to install the Z Counterforms. The Z Counterforms that I have here are the square edge, and I went with the square edge because I feel like it just gives a nice, simple, modern look. And also with this outdoor kitchen, I got a lot of square edges around the actual appliances and whatnot, so the square edge was a good choice for me. But as you can see, there's many other edges you can choose from, such as half bullnose and full bullnose. So you have a lot of variety when it comes to options with the Z Counterforms. So I'm going to begin installing the Counterforms against this siding. So I'm going to show you how I'm going to do that. This Z Counterform is going to form the edge that's going to have the overhang on it. And then we got the piece that corresponds with it that goes up against the back edge of the countertop. So you could screw this down essentially anywhere on top of this cement board to form it to where you want it. So this is going to go right back against your drywall or siding or whatnot, wherever you're going to stop the back end of your countertop. And as you can see, there's a height difference. This one's a little higher. That's because once you install this on the edge like so, we're going to actually be the same height off the cement board once this piece is installed. So that's important to remember why there's two different types of the Z Counterform. I'm going to begin here on this outside edge of the countertop to install the forms. I'm going to first get my measurement from right up against the siding or the drywall, depending on your situation, to this first corner, and I got 27 inches. So I'm going to need to 45 this first section here on this end in order to continue running it on the outside of the countertop. In order to cut the Z Counterform, I highly recommend a miter saw. It's almost impossible to cut this with a circular saw accurately, so you need to rent one, or if you own one, great. So the first measurement, like I said, is 27 inches. So I'm going to pull off this edge that's going to be against the structure. And right here is 27 inches. And now we need to make sure we stay oriented to where we are measuring from and to. So this corner is right where we measured to, because this is going to overlap that edge. So we're going to mark 27 right here at that point. And now I'm using a red pencil. That's because gray pencil obviously won't show up well on the Z Counterform because it's black. And now I'm going to turn my saw to a 45 because we need to continue the run, like I said. And now this is a 45 outside corner. So I'm going to show you the inside corner cuts here in just a bit. And it's always important to wear your ear protection and eye protection when using any power tools. As you can see, that miter saw gives it a nice clean cut. In order to install the Z Counterform, we're going to be using the panhead screws that are actually from the Z Counterform website. And these are number 10 5/8 inch zinc plated screws. And in order to install these, we need to drill holes on this edge of the Z Counterform. I'm going to be using a 5/32 drill bit. I'm going to install 3 screws across this piece. So we need to make sure that we pre-drill each place where we're going to install a screw. So I'm going to go right about the middle of the lip and place a screw. I'm going to place the Z Counterform right up to where we measured from. And as you can see, we are right on the point on the edge of the countertop where we wanted to end. And now we just hold this tight up against our overhang boards that's supporting the edge and install the screws right on top of here. And be careful not to sink these screws really hard because they will strip out the cement board. So nice and gently install this screw to where it holds down the Z-form. You can use a Phillips bit or a square drive to install these screws. This form is installed. Now we got to cut a 45 on this one to continue the run. I got a full piece of Z Counterform here because this next run is over 90 inches long, and I'm going to have to 45 to meet that corner that we just installed. And then we got to continue the run, and because of that, we need to cut a 45 on the other side as well, because our next piece will have to splice together there, and I'll show you more here in just a moment. But let me cut this on a 45 on each end here. So we're going to turn our 45 going the other way now to continue the edge of the countertop and cut that here. And now we cut the other side at a 45 as well. We're going to pre-drill for screws about every foot or so. All right, as you can see, the 45 here is going to give us a nice edge like so, and we're going to go through and place tape on these edges after we install everything. So it's just going to hang like that for now. So we just butt it tight inside for the 45 and then place a screw. And again, just snug these up. I now need to get a measurement from the inside corner, so my tape will be placed tight right to the inside corner, right to this point on this Z Counterform to get my length measurement. And we got 77.5. I'm going to begin cutting this by simply placing a 45 here on this end first before we get our measurement. And now we're going to pull from this corner in the center to get our 77.5 measurement. And remember, this is an inside corner, so it's going to be the opposite of the outside corner. So instead of our corner coming in like this, we're actually going to be in like this. So just try to keep that in your mind while you're cutting your forms, to that you have everything oriented right before you make your cut, because after you make your cut, you can't uncut it. All right, now we need to pre-drill this, then install it. We're going to set this up here and watch as this goes together here. It's going to splice together nice and clean like so. So again, we're going to reinforce that with tape here later. And then our corner over here looks really good as well. It's ready for our piece of button to hit. So now we're going to secure this down with the screws. In order to get this measurement, I have the opening for the grill right here, and ultimately there's going to be plywood there like I mentioned before. So I'm going to hold this up temporarily to get my measurement, and then I'm going to butt my tape up against that plywood in order to get the distance from the plywood to the inside corner, and that's going to give me about 10 1/4. So I need to cut this about 10 1/4 up to this plywood. And again, we're going to 45 here, then cut it straight on this edge. Great thing about this cut is we actually have the scrap from the first piece that we cut when we started installing this form. So I'm actually just going to use this 45 as the inside corner. They're going to measure off that point to get our 10 1/4 and cut it straight. Here's the piece that we're going to install in that corner, and a small detail here that you may want to do. Whenever this snaps off later after the concrete is hardened, we're going to be left with this part underneath of the countertop. So we can cut this back about a 1/2 inch on this edge, just so that you don't see that plastic form in the opening for the grill. So I'm just going to take the oscillating tool and cut this back a little bit. Snap that off, and now that will give us a nice clean look when it's all done. Now when we place this into place, that gives us a nice inside corner there. and we're going to secure that. And look, this is flush with the edge of that opening and a little setback here on this section. So that looks really good. I'm now going to show you how to install the back forms. With the back form, we're going to place it right up against the back of where the countertop is going to be. And now we have our profile here that we need to cut this back section out of this back form in order to be able to set nicely with this profile form. So I'm just going to mark right here in order to cut this little section out. I can use the oscillating tool or the miter saw, just cut to here. Then we're going to snap it off in this back corner. All right, so I'm just going to cut right down the mark we made and don't cut into the actual form. I'm now going to take my oscillating tool and just go along that corner and cut that out. Okay, as you can see, we are left with that. And now this side, we need to put a 45 on to continue the back form because we will have to splice it together. But you could also just do straight cuts just because it's in the back and it's really not that big a deal. But whatever you want to do, I'm just going to make a 45 because that's the carpenter in me talking. And just like the profile forms, we got a pre-drill for the screws. And you could probably get away with every 1.5 feet with these just because the structure is going to be supporting this form really well. So we're going to do that now. Okay, we're going to place this where it goes. This one's pretty straightforward, tight against the back of the countertop. And then we want to line the tops with the profile edge in this case, and then screw it down. Now to finish this back run, we simply just cut a 45 here and continue till the end. I'm now just going to use those same principles to run the rest of the Z Counterform around this outdoor kitchen. Now we're going to form up around the openings using 1/2-inch plywood for the grill, side burner, and griddle. And this will go from form to form, and it's going to give me the height in which I got to run my plywood up to. So if you take a look here, if we install this piece of plywood right up to the top of this form here, then to get that height over there, we simply just have to float from form to form like so, and just butt up right against it. So right there is the height in which I have to install it. Now I'm just going to install deck screws here or construction screws just to hold it into place. As you can see, we now have a perfectly level form, and I'm going to do that around the whole opening. It's now time to address the sink. We first need to set our sink into place. So I'm going to grab my undermount sink and set it right where it belongs. And then I would like to point out, if you are not installing an undermount sink, you would install your sink after you pour your countertop. So in this case, we're installing it undermount to where it's below the countertop. And now that we are in position, I'm just going to take my straight edge, and I can't set my straight edge up right here because of the lip of the siding. So I got to turn this sideways, but it's still a straight plane. And now I'm going to get a measurement from the bottom of this straight plane, which is the float, and then we're going to get to the lip of this sink and see what we got. So if I take a measurement, I got 1.5 inches roughly right there. Let me make sure I'm the same here. So it looks like 1.5 inches will do just fine. So that's the thickness of a 2x4, so that works out really well. So I'm going to take my sink back out, and then we're going to install the lip around the edge that's going to keep the concrete from going into the sink. And this sink form has a sticky side here, and the sticky side is going to go up inside of the sink to seal it off. And we simply peel this back, and it's going to be sticky after the fact. So I'm first going to try to bend this around all these corners and end to where the joint is on this side of the sink. This is where we'll be standing, and here's the drain. So you don't want it over here, because if you see the overlap after the concrete's poured, if the joint's here, you'll never notice it. And another thing, because I have this lip on my sink, I will have to rip down a little piece off the edge of each side of here just because of this lip, and that lip's meant to set stuff on. So because this is flexible, even if you have an oval sink or a circular sink, this will work just fine. So I'm first going to bend this in the shape of the sink. Okay, I now have this bent roughly in the shape in which it needs to be installed. So because of these lips, I got to take a measurement here. So I'm going to take my block that's going to act as the depth of the concrete. Then I'm going to get a measurement down here. So I'm going to cut it down about 2 1/4, only in the spots in which it's going to sit on this lip. In order to cut this, I'm just going to use 10 snips to make the cut. Now that I got the sink form cut, I'm going to install it right around the lip of the sink from the inside using my block as a spacer, my 2x4 block. I waited until the sink form was stuck onto the sink and officially installed before cutting it to length, just in case it took extra length to get around the corners once it was finally installed. The sink form is on around the sink, and I got my correct height. I'm now going to take a little bit of this Gorilla Tape and reinforce this joint. Because I got a bunch of extra plywood, I'm going to cut a piece of plywood the exact size of the inside of here, and it's going to sit on this lip. Because I have this lip, I'm going to take advantage of it, and that's going to reinforce this while we're pouring to make sure we don't have any issues. All right, I cut out a piece of plywood to fit inside of this sink, and as you can see, it's a nice snug fit. And in order to remove this later, I'm going to place a couple of these short screws here, so that way I can just grab hold of the screws to lift the board out of the hole. So now we can just pull it up after we're done pouring. I'm now going to dry fit this into place one more time just to make sure these are sitting correctly. Okay, I'm going to double check just to make sure everything's good to go with the sink one more time, because we want to get it right in the first shot. And I'm just going to take my straight edge and go right across here, just make sure we're good to go. And it's looking really good there. Yeah, awesome. Yep, that's what we want. So now that we're good here, we're going to silicone around this edge and then set the sink where we want it. I'm going to use the 100% silicone that we used to put down the cement board, and I got a relatively large cut off the end of this tube, and I want to put a nice hardy bead right around this sink form, and that's actually going to create the profile of the bottom part of the countertop later on after we remove this form, and we will peel off the silicone later, just so you know. So I'm going to get this on here and then set the sink into place. I'm now simply just going to take my finger and then smooth this out to make it look nice and pretty. And they also make a tool you can use too to do this, but that works just fine. Now that that's done, we're going to set the sink into place. Before setting the sink on the cement board, I'm going to place silicone down around the edge of the opening. I'm now going to set the sink right in the opening. All right, and I'm going to pull this sink as close to me as I can get, just because I want the sink as close to my body when I'm using it comfortably, and that looks nice and centered there. And we can measure off our Z form just to make sure we're sitting nice and square. That looks really good there. And now I'm going to place my plywood down this hole to seal it up. I'm going to clean off each outside corner and inside corner, and then use tape. You can use duct tape, Gorilla Tape. In this case, it's Gorilla Tape just to secure these corners like so. We want to make sure they're lined up at the top really well. and then place tape just to hold everything together and keep the concrete in the form. With the Z Counterform system, we have a knockout for the faucet, and this knockout is going to be installed from up under the cement board, and then it's going to protrude up high enough to be almost flush or flush with the concrete top. And now with that being said, after it sets up, we pull this out from the bottom, then we knock out the concrete where the faucet is going to be installed. So I'm going to mark where I want my faucet to be installed. Then I'm going to drill a hole using a 2 5/8 inch hole saw, so that way we can install this knockout. We're going to go through with 100% silicone one more time and seal any crack or gap that we might think could leak while we are pouring our concrete. For instance, if a cut wasn't great on our Z Counterforms, we can caulk that with a little bit of caulk. Any crack like here that we think might leak, we can hit that real quick. Do it now because after the mesh is on, we don't want to have to move it. So I'm going to go through and just hit any spot I see now. It's now time to install the liner if you choose to do so. You don't have to install a liner, but I'm going to because it's going to give it a nice rock face, heavy chisel look in this case. And this was supplied by Concrete Countertop Solutions as well. And this is simply going to be secured with double-sided tape. And we're just going to make straight cuts. And then right here in these corners, I might chip away the top and bottom so it forms right into this corner really well. And then we're just going to butt the long runs and then put a little caulk to maybe blend it together there. And that's all there is to it, so I'm going to go ahead and install this now. All right, with this laid into place, I'm just going to mark the length like so. This way we can get a nice accurate measurement. So I'm going to cut it off straight right there. I'm simply going to make this cut with a pair of 10 snips, the same 10 snips that we used earlier to cut the sink form. And if you're wondering why I have a tarp here in the background, it's because it's starting to rain. I don't want to get this wet. So after the rain, we can continue filming. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this off square right here. I'm going to wipe the back of the liner off really well and the inside of the form here so it sticks well. And then I'm just going to take a strip of the double-sided tape here, stick it in the form, and do this every so often down this run first. I'm going to go ahead and remove the film over the double-sided tape. We're now going to stick the liner right to that double-sided tape. And you got to remember the pressure of the concrete when we start pouring it will help push it up against that Z Counterform, just so you know. And that's all there is to placing it in the liner. Now I'm going to show you what I'm going to do in this corner. If you notice when you push these together in the corner, there's a slight gap here because of the profile of this rock face. So I'm going to trim off a little bit from the top and bottom so it slides up tight here. That corner looks much better, so whenever the concrete hardens, it'll be a much smoother finish. I'm now going to continue this process around the whole outside edge of the countertop. After installing the liner using the spot tape method, it would probably be easier just to use long strips of tape the whole length of the liner, and it would also hold better as well. In order to cut the inside corners, I 45'd using the oscillating tool to have a nice joint. You could also use a miter saw as well. I'm now going to install the fiber mesh. Now this fiber mesh is a special fiber mesh. It's alkali resistant and it's actually made up of fiberglass. So I'm wearing gloves as you can see. And what's really neat about this, you can simply cut this stuff using 10 snips or even just household scissors. It cuts very easy. And also, we're simply going to just lay this out where we want to install it. So I'm just going to roll it out like so. And we're going to cut it to length. So in order to cut this, we simply just cut it like this. And it cuts extremely easy. I'm now going to flip it to where it wants to curl down instead of up so it stays into place. I'm going to use these Z-clips, and these Z-clips are ultimately what holds it up off the bottom of the concrete countertop, because if this is laying in the bottom, it's not doing anything. You need to raise it up in the middle of the concrete countertop. So this clip simply just snaps on like so, and that's all there is. It's more or less a chair that holds it up, and we're going to space these about every foot apart. I'm going to use the screws that we used earlier in the same exact bit, the square drive or the supplied bit. And then we're going to install a screw right into the screw hole that's on each one of these clips. Make sure we stretch this as we go to make sure we're sitting nice and snug. Now that we got the first row on, and it's going to hold this for us, and we're going to flip it over and then take our chairs and we're going to place these every foot apart to hold the rest of this up. All right, now as you just seen, I did them every 1 foot apart roughly, and then went through in between each 1 foot apart square and placed another one in the center. So as you can see, there are several of these clips in place. I'm now going to go through and just place a little tension on these clips and make sure we're nice and flat and tight, and then place a screw into each one of those clips. As you just seen, that fiber mesh goes down really nice, and after this is done, I really like the looks of it, but we got to do this across the whole countertop. I'd like to point out I overlapped a couple inches in the areas where the fiber mesh wasn't quite wide enough. So as you can see, it has a nice blend wherever you have them joining. Fiber mesh is now complete, and it's time to move on to preparing for the pour. And this part is just as simple as protecting what you don't want concrete to get on. I'm going to use blue painter's tape to tape around the edge here on the inside of this sink form, so that way we don't have any concrete go down here and get into the sink, so it's just a little extra security. And I'm also going to take blue painter's tape and tape this area here, because when I screed across this when we're pouring, I don't want to scuff up the siding, because this siding will still be exposed after the pour is done. So I'm going to protect those two things, and then I'm going to put plastic and tarps down on the floor so we don't mess up our nice stamped concrete. In order to protect the stamped concrete below the openings, I decided to enclose the openings using plywood so we are well protected. It's finally time for the moment I've been waiting for, actually mixing up the concrete and pouring the countertop. I want to explain what I have here in this setup. First thing I'd like to explain, I got a 60-pound bag of sand mix. Now a sand mix is more or less concrete without the stone in it, and it can pour anywhere from a 1/2 inch to 2 inch thick, no problem. And this is what most people use for concrete countertops because of that reason. And then what we're going to mix with it is this Liquidcrete. This is by Concrete Countertop Solution as well. It's more or less a bag of acrylic fibers that's going to mix in with the sand mix and create a really strong countertop. So this is going to be a great additive to add in. And then we got our mixer, and you can use a 1/2 inch drill with a mixing blade on it as well. Either way, it's just the same idea. And then I got a 5-gallon bucket for mixing in. Then I got a 5-gallon bucket of water. And then I got a pitcher here that measures out 2 quarts or whatever we need to measure at a time, because it's important to get your water ratio the same with every mix, so that way it looks more uniform when you have a nice finished top. So we have this all ready to go. So we're first going to mix up the Liquidcrete, and then we're going to mix in the sand mix after that. I'm first going to mix up the Liquidcrete. In order to mix this up, we need to add the water and this in kind of at the same time and mix as we're going. So I'm first going to measure out the 2 quarts of water in my pitcher. So that looks about right there. A little bit out of that. That looks good. So we're going to open up this bag of Liquidcrete and then start mixing it and blending it together at the same time. Now we got to mix this up for 1 to 2 minutes. All right, now that that's mixed up well, we're going to now mix in the sand mix. Same idea, 2 quarts of water with a whole 60-pound bag of sand mix. We now add 1 more quart of water after we have that mixed up well to finish it off. As you can see, it's like a thick pancake batter is the recommended consistency, so it looks like we are ready to pour this. Before pouring the concrete into the form, I have my screed tool here, and we're going to use that to level across from form to form. And I also have a small trowel. I'm going to use that to tap the sides as we're pouring before we vibrate the sides with our palm sander. And I have a water bottle here for misting down the cement board, because the cement board's really dry and it'll suck the moisture right out of that concrete. So a key to nice concrete finishing is to make sure we have a slow drying concrete slab, because if it dries fast, it has more potential of cracking. But I'm not a professional concrete finisher, but I have noticed in the past that's the case. So we're going to mist this down. All right, this bucket of concrete is relatively heavy, so a helper may be recommended if you need one. I'm going to take my little trowel and just get all of it out. Just so you know, I have my helper with me. He's going to be mixing up the concrete as I'm pushing this around the form and screeding across the top. I have the concrete countertop solution magnesium float here, and I'm just going to use this to push around the concrete. So I'm just going to push it right into these sides of the form and get it nice and level with the form. And if you need to pull up this mesh and get it into the middle of the form, you can. And this might be a little on the thick side, but we'll work with it for now. And then we're just going to form it right to the top of those forms. And as I go, I'm going to take the back of my trowel and tap these sides like so, and just vibrate that edge to get any air. It'll help the concrete go right around that form. And I'm going to get a little bit more in here before I screed across the top. Okay, we got our second 5-gallon bucket. We're just going to push this all over here. Almost time to screed across here. I just needed more volume in here. All right, tap the sides. I'm now going to use the screed, and with this screed, because I got to go under this siding, I'm going to have to turn on its side. I know that's not ideal, but I have to in this case, just because of that siding. So I'm just going to level right across here. Then I got a little low spot here, so I'm going to take a little mortar, fill that in. All right, we're going to screed across that again. You'd usually shift this left to right, but right here, as you can see, we really can't do that. All right, getting a good start there. All right, just keep moving along. placing it down along the forms. Try to get it nice and even. So far, so good. All right, and I'm just going to screed right across that new area. Once I started working more with the screed tool, I finally got enough area here to where I could screed across and finally move it back and forth, which was a big help when it came to leveling out the top of the concrete. In order to vibrate this liner even more, we're going to take a palm sander and just hit this some as we go too. Nice cake batter like mix. We like that. Flows into that screen really well. Nice. That's less dry than the one we had when we first started. I like that a little better. Now we more or less repeat that step until we get around the whole outdoor kitchen. Once I got the countertop screed up to the corner of the siding, I could finally use my screed tool in the upright position and use the handles, and then I had to custom make a screed tool out of plywood to get this sharp corner. It's been about 30 minutes to an hour, probably more closer to an hour since we poured this. Now I'm going to go through with my magnesium float and just lightly hit the surface just to get some of these imperfections out and smooth it out, like you see these ripples and whatnot. So we're just lightly going to hit this to start smoothing it out, and this is going to give a little texture to it. So the steel trowel is going to be the one we're going to use for our final. So this is just a rough, quick, light touch. Over this next 1 minute clip, I just wanted this video to play in real time so you get a general idea of how I use the magnesium float to float this concrete, because when I speed up the clips, it's hard to really get the full effect of the visuals while it is moving fast. And I'm angling my trowel up just a little bit so I don't dig into the concrete. As you can see, that's bringing the water up to the surface, filling in any of those little holes and whatnot that you see. So this is important to giving us a nice finish. And as you can see, I'm using the form to go right up against and go right across. Making sure I don't dig into the fresh concrete. And if you have any faint marks, that's okay. We'll get that on the next pass with the steel trowel. Here is a tip. If you have a countertop that is really wide, such as this one that's 53 inches wide from form to form, I had to use a 2x4 in order to screed across the forms. So that's something you may have to do. It all depends on what you're trying to screed across. Once we got towards the end of pouring this countertop, we were trying to be careful not to overfill the forms, but that happened to be something we did, so we just simply scooped out what we could into a bucket and then screed right across and let the excess flow over. And I also hit this with a float early, and then I actually hit it again once it set up a little more because it was a little too early to give it a nice float finish. It's now time to use the steel trowel across this top, and the float did a good job trying to level out most of the imperfections. Now I'm going to use this to hopefully get a nice glass finish, and it's been at least 4 hours since I've done this pour, so if it's really hot it's probably going to set up quicker than that, and if it's colder then it's probably going to take longer. So just use your best judgment. If you press in on it and it's hard to push in yet leaves a print like that, it looks like we should be good to go. So I'm going to take my trowel and little half circles here. I'm going to raise the edge up about 1/4 inch off the top and just smooth it all out, hopefully to give us a nice glass finish. But we'll see what happens. Again, I'm not a pro finisher. This is a DIY job, so we're going to see how it goes. All right, as you can see, it's definitely smoothing out all the little humps and bumps. It's looking good. And I can hear this thing scraping across the top. It's set up so much, so that's what we want to do. Give it a nice finish. And I'm pressing down fairly firm, not really firm, just enough to help level off this top. I'm just taking my time here because after this pass, it's going to be next to what it's going to look like when it's totally finished. All right, I'm just going to keep this momentum going around the whole countertop. One important factor I noticed while I was finishing is that the concrete would set up much faster when it is in direct sunlight, meaning I had this top covered. It was much easier to finish this because it was such a big project, and not having the sun on it was very helpful to give me time to finish it. So just keep that in mind if you are working in direct sunlight. The concrete countertops are now poured and finished. And just so you know, I started this project 8 hours ago, and because this is such a massive countertop, we went through 30 bags of sand mix and a bunch of bags of the Liquicrete, and this turned out really good from what I can tell right now. And if you take a look across the top, you're just seeing a sheen from the trowel marks, but I tell you what, it's going to look really nice when it's done and finished and stained and sealed. So I'm going to let this set up for 48 hours before I take the forms off. Let me show you what I did with the leftover concrete that you'll probably appreciate. When I was screeding the last bit of countertop, as you've seen it falling into a bucket, I took it and put it in this box. It's going to give me some sample concrete to practice on with my stain and sealer to make sure it's the finish I want. It's been 2 days since we poured this concrete, and it has set up really well. It's actually more smooth than what I anticipated. I am very pleased with what I see so far. I'm going to use what's called a gem pad before removing the forms. And the reason why we want to do this is because if we start pulling these forms off now, you risk pulling off some of the concrete off the edge, and you don't want that look of having a rough corner on the edge of your top. So because of that, we're going to hit all the edges first with the gem pad. This is more or less just diamond sandpaper. So we're going to take this out of the package, and we're going to get it set up onto the sanding sponge. And as you can see, we got a 300 grit, we got a 150, and we got a 60. So I'm just going to start with the 150 grit, just give me a medium grit to go with, and see what we got from there. So, and from my tile video, you may remember me using a similar product as this to break the edge of the tile to give it a nice smooth edge. So same idea here, we're going to break up this concrete, then pull off these forms. I'm simply going to take the gym pad and just break off and sand these edges just so that concrete comes off there easier. So now we're going to remove the form. I'm going to remove the tape off these corners and any overlapping parts first. In order to remove the form itself, we simply just pull down on it, and it's going to pull this liner off at the same time. So we're just going to start pulling it off kind of easy here at first, just to make sure we don't pull any of that concrete. All right, and that snapped off actually relatively easy. Definitely no problem there, and I love this edge. That rock face looks awesome. So I am very thankful I went with this liner for this project. Looks great. And now, as you can see, we got this edge here. We can take our diamond sponge, the gym pad, and just take that edge off where we have a little buildup. But I'm going to first break off all the forms before hitting all the edges. Now that the Z Counterform is removed, I'm going to remove the sink form. Same idea. I'm going to just kind of pull this back so it doesn't break the edge the best I can. And if I have to, hit the edge there where it's level to help break it up so we don't have anything pull. All right, and I'm going to break some of this concrete down into this piece of plywood so that way we don't have a bunch of concrete go down onto the sink and risk scratching it. So I'm going to try to remove that as well. All right, I'm going to pull this plywood up out of the sink form. Beautiful. And as you can see, the sink is nice and clean. Just got some dust in it now from all the little particles it broke. So now I'm going to start removing this sink form. It actually peels off really clean. Got it out in one piece. I'm now going to peel the silicone out where we made that joint when we sealed the form onto the sink. And as you can see, that cleaned up real nice. And last but not least, I removed the forms that were formed around the openings for the grill, side burner, and griddle. Using the gym pad, I'm going to break these edges here. And I'm not going to hit it really hard because I don't want it rounded over too much, but just enough so it ain't so sharp here on the edge. And some of the heavier spots where I have a little more lip, I'll probably switch to the 60 grit. That way we can knock it off a little quicker. So I'm going to go around the whole edge and just give it a quick rounding. Again, not real aggressive for me, depends on what look you're looking for, but something like that. It actually sands relatively easy with this gym pad. Because I had some buildup on the edges of the countertop, I did have to sand a little harder with the gym pad there to remove that, and I also removed the knockout for the sink. Before staining the countertop, it's important to get this surface opened up so it can accept the stain better. And this process will also give us a little smoother finish. I'm going to be using the 120 grit sandpaper on an orbital sander hook and loop connection first. And I'm going to go through with the 120 grit, hit the whole top of the countertop. And then I'm going to switch to 220 grit sandpaper and hit the top after that. And it's going to give it a much smoother finish. So we're going to do this with the whole countertop first. And I'm also going to wear a respirator because it's probably not a good idea to breathe in the dust from the concrete. So I'm going to use that, or if you're in a well-ventilated area with the air moving in one direction, either way, just so you don't breathe in the dust. I think that's important to note. So I'm going to go through and do the whole countertop first. Before I put this on, I just want to show you how I'm going to do this. I'm going to take the sanding disc, place it onto the orbital sander like so. And you could also hook a shop vac up to your sander as well. Either way, a way to control the dust. And then we're going to just go over this surface, as you can see here. And you can see how it's scuffing up the surface slightly, making it really, really smooth. And you can see the dust it's creating here now. So again, right now I'm downwind from it, or I'm upwind from it, so I'm not breathing it for this demonstration. But we're just trying to get all the loose debris off the top right now. Here's an area that was not perfectly finished with the steel trowel, and I used the sander to sand that out. And it is surprisingly easy to sand the concrete using the palm sander. So you get the idea. So I'm going to put my respirator on and do this whole top. After going over it with the 150 grit, I did switch to the 220 to finish up sanding. And then after I did the sanding, I took an air hose and blew off all the loose dust. And then after that, I took a damp rag and then wiped down all of the dust off the top and then masked up the siding for the pour. I'm now going to stain the countertop. And if you remember from the other day, I poured the leftover concrete into this box, and now I have a sample to experiment with my different stains. I got two stains, Dove and Boulder, and I'm going to put both of them in a mix in a water bottle, a 1:2, 1 part stain and 2 parts water, and we're going to see what kind of color that gives us. So let's dump out this sample piece that's in this box and do a little experimenting. I essentially have a sample of the countertop here in my hand. Yeah, it doesn't have the sanding and all that done, but this side is nice and smooth. So we got two sides we can experiment on. So I'm now going to mix up my stain and try it out. I have 2 water bottles here and they have measurements on the side. So right here is 1 liter and right here is 700 milliliters. I just have it filled up 700 milliliters with water on both of these. Then I'm going to finish filling the rest up with the stain. And here are my stains. So I'm going to go ahead and prepare this now. I'm going to move this out of the way so I don't get stain on it. This stain is also by Concrete Countertop Solutions. This is great for outdoors because it has UV protection in it. So for an outdoor kitchen, this is perfect. When it came to that ratio, that's the ratio that I'm going with and see what it looks like. And you can mix it 100% strength if you want. It all depends on what you're looking for. I'm going to try to lighten it up some. And you can even mix it as light as 1 to 8. Whatever you want to do, try it and see if it works for you. Okay, I'm going to start with the Boulder and we're going to see what that looks like. All right, as you can see, that one is pretty dark. And now let's try this one. Run some of this water out first. All right, I'm going to let these set and dry, and then we're going to see what we got. Where I poured the pure stain that wasn't diluted, as you can see, it feathers out and kind of dries up and doesn't change too much, which is good, so it's a little more forgiving that way. In the places where I sprayed it, it just slightly darkened it, which is what I wanted it to do with the Boulder. And then the Dove, made it slightly gray. So I'm going to go through and kind of blend both of these for now, just to see what I got after that. And then I might go back through with a paintbrush and kind of add some vein effects after the fact. So let's see what we got when we just lightly spray it first. I'm first going to use my pump sprayer and dampen the surface here, and then I'm going to put my stain on it. So I'm just going to go ahead and just dampen everything and get it nice and wet. And that is supposedly going to help so the stain isn't too extreme in certain areas. It'll help it water out. I'm now going to use the Dove and just hit it throughout here and just trying to get it nice coat. I'm now going to use my diluted boulder and go through and do the same thing. All right, I'm going to keep that up and go around the whole countertop. I'm now going to go back through with more boulder and try to paint some veins on, so to speak. I'm going to use my brush and just kind of dab it around and get everything kind of blended up and just make more vein looks throughout the top. So that way it makes it more of a natural look. And that's going to give it more dimension. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. All right, I went ahead and spread out the stain to give me some vein look throughout it. I'm not sure how it's going to turn out, but I'm going to let this set for a couple hours, maybe even 3, because it's kind of damp out here. And then I'm going to wipe it all off and see what we got. To give the illusion of the veins going down the side of the concrete slab, I just took a brush and more or less just brushed the light stain to continue the vein. And then wherever I wanted a dark thin vein, I took the concentrate of stain without being watered down and used the edge of my brush and then placed small veins throughout the slab to give it a very detailed dimensional look. This may be something you want to practice on, such as a piece of cardboard first, just to get the feel for it. Then in order to blend together the lines, I simply took my sprayer and sprayed water right over top of them when it's relatively fresh. It's the morning of the following day, and this has totally dried. And as you can see, once that stain bleeds out, it gives it such a nice natural look using the water method. So I highly recommend that. And just so you know, that was water-based stain, so water's going to help it bleed out, as you've seen. But this is such a cool looking top now, and adding these details to where they come around the side really help add definition to the top. So now I'm going to wipe this down really well before applying the sealer. Now that the top is totally dried from the water that we just used to wipe down the countertop, we're going to place the sealer onto the top using a 1/4-inch nap roller. I got a 9-inch roller here. You can get away with a smaller roller if you have a smaller top. I just have so much square footage here that I figured it'd be best to use a bigger roller. And I'm going to be using Counterform 14. This is water-based as well, just like the stain. And this is going to go on in 2 coats in my case. You can always apply more coats if you'd like, but I'm just going to place 2 coats on and allow it to dry before placing the second coat on. And this is very straightforward. If you haven't placed sealer on before, especially if it's penetrating sealer, it's fairly forgiving. You don't have to worry about having uneven coats, but you can get it uneven if you miss a spot or don't roll it on in a similar fashion throughout the whole top. But again, it's a little more forgiving than a non-penetrating sealer. So we're going to go ahead and place a coat over this whole top. So let me show you how I'm going to do it. I'm going to begin by shaking up the Counterform 14 really well and then pouring it into my paint tray. I got a little brush with me just to hit along the sides of the counter where it's going to be hard to get with a roller, so I'm going to have that as well. In fact, I'm going to begin just by hitting the sides here where I can't reach well with the roller. I'm now just going to load my roller up and then strain off some of it. And we're just going to roll this like so. I'm not going to press really hard here. Just trying to get a nice even coat on. And I'm going to alternate directions to help blend it in really well. And with this 9-inch roller, one load will go a long ways. And again, we're just rolling and blending it in. And I'm actually going to use the brush to hit these edges here. And since this is a heavy chiseled rock look, it will absorb a good bit of this, I can tell as I'm brushing it on. The more porous the surface, the more it'll soak up. So you'll notice this flat top, it's not soaking up rapidly. That's because it's not as porous as the sides here. Now I'm just going to blend it all together. As you can see, it's disappearing and absorbing into the top. There you have it. So I'm just going to rinse and repeat that around this whole top and then do it for a second coat. Here is the final product of the concrete countertops. I must say, I am very happy with the results, and the system that Concrete Countertop Solution offers makes this a very simple, easy task for most DIYers to tackle. And if you're nervous about working with concrete like most people, I recommend just practicing on maybe a small top at first, just so you can get the confidence to tackle a large countertop such as this. Just remember, do your due diligence, have patience, and practice will make perfect. The concrete countertops have been sitting for the rest of the day. I'm here in the evening, and as you can see, we got a nice, smooth, almost glass-like finish on this countertop. I am simply amazed by how simple the system actually is and how good this top came out. And I'm going to say this is definitely an amazing DIY project if you're willing to tackle it. And if you want to see how I'm going to install the outdoor kitchen doors and drawers, check out this video. It'll help you out.